starting your day with us. And good morning to Miller. And what's going to happen next? I know we've kind of been on a roller coaster of a ride with weather.
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of trying to put my thumb on what's going to happen today. We do have a cold front that's coming in from the northeast, but we have this high pressure down to our southwest. So it depends on how far that front wants to come in. We may cool down some, or we may actually warm up some, or we may just stay exactly where we are right now. So these are the days that kind of make my hair go gray in terms of trying to forecast. I will tell you this, we all have a chance of seeing some snow today. We are milder than where we should be this morning as we start. We should be around 18 degrees here in Billings. We're already at 36. Just kind of show you what kind of day we have today. Now, we may not get much warmer than we are right now, and those temperatures, depending on how that front, how deep it wants to come in, these temperatures may fall as we go along, and we'll tell you all about this with the main forecast coming up. Feels like 26 right now at Logan, winds out of the northwest at 16. You can see temperatures as we wake up this morning, mainly in the 30s. Our cold spot, though, Gardner, is that right? You're sitting at 13. We've got 27 in Clark. For the most part, the rest of us, especially off to our west-northwest, we see those or northeast actually, we are seeing those temperatures in the 30s. So those are the projected highs today. Some of us, again, may not get much warmer than we are, may see those temperatures fall as we go along today, and we have that chance of snow. Miller's way too early trivia. We've got several guesses already. What do you think this is? The first male in this profession started in 1922. The first female started in 1930. What do you think that profession is? Go to my Facebook page or email those guesses. The answer comes before 6. Victoria.
We begin here in Billings, where tonight the School District 2 School Board will decide whether or not to keep two controversial books in their libraries. Lawn Boy and Genderqueer, a memoir, also caused an uproar when they were found in a middle school in Virginia. According to concerned parents, Lawn Boy describes sexual acts between two underage boys, while Genderqueer features drawings of intimate adults. The school board has already recommended pulling them off the shelves and will put it up for vote tonight. Some community members argue taking the books out of the schools sends the wrong message to the LGBTQ+ community. The owners of a Billings mobile home park where residents have been complaining about their drinking water are promising to make repairs. Those living at Meadowlark Mobile Home Park told us last week their water often comes out of the faucet black or brown and full of sediment. Meadowlark's owner, Haven Park Communities, released a statement over the weekend saying, in part, "We assure you that we have been testing community water daily. Our water is safe and free of any bacteria or contamination." They also say more repairs to a filter in the well system will be made in 2 weeks, and that all residents who still feel unsafe can get bottled water from the office. As the standoff between Russia, Ukraine, and much of the Western world continues, the U.S. has begun ordering American families working in the region to leave immediately. CBS's Laura Podesta reports on the weekend's developments.
Rising tension between Russia and Ukraine has prompted the United States to remove much of its personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, ordering all non-essential workers and their families to get out of the country as soon as possible. The White House is standing by the Ukrainian government and has been working to rally European allies in response to Russian aggression. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke on CBS's Face the Nation.
We've provided very significant military assistance to Ukraine. We've been taking action against Russian agents in Ukraine.
Those agents are being accused of committing so-called false flag operations inside Ukraine that Russia could use as an excuse for all-out war. The U.S. and its allies have been weighing whether and when to impose new, potentially devastating economic sanctions.
The most important thing we can do is to use them as a deterrent, as a means of dissuading Russia from engaging in further aggression. Once sanctions are triggered, you lose the deterrent effect.
Despite the military movement seen on the ground and by satellite, the Kremlin has repeatedly said it doesn't intend to invade Ukraine. Russia is also denying British reports it's trying to replace the Ukrainian government with a pro-Moscow administration. Laura Podesta, CBS News.
The U.S. State Department also warned Americans not to travel to Ukraine or Russia, issuing its highest level 4 do not travel advisories. Thousands gathered in Washington, D.C. Sunday to protest COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Robert Kennedy Jr., son of the late New York Senator and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, was among the speakers. Sunday's rally comes as daily COVID-19 cases appear to be leveling off. Dr. Anthony Fauci says in the coming weeks, infection levels could get to a low enough level that COVID eventually becomes the type of respiratory infection people have learned to live with. Many feel President Biden has many promises to deliver on. For example, he still wants to pass voter rights legislation, improve supply chain issues, and address inflation. But as reporter Joe St. George explains, it's not the controversial or complex issue that may be the president's biggest obstacle, but the time and the hotly contested election later this year.
A job not yet finished.
President Biden seeking to jumpstart his stalled agenda in Congress again this week. What's still on the table impacting you? Modest election changes are possible. New COVID relief spending is too. Not to mention funding for the environment and pre-K education. Possible executive orders are possible as well if Congress doesn't act. But the president is facing the realization that he doesn't have all the time in the world to get his ambitions accomplished. This year is an election year, with polls suggesting Democrats may lose control of at least one chamber of Congress.
I don't believe the polls.
But while the president may not believe the polling, you can't dismiss the fact that each one of these Democrats is retiring. And while some are doing so to run for a different office, it is a higher than usual number, and a sign Democrats may have some tough political fights this year. And it's not just retirements impacting the president. Democrats are facing difficult redistricting fights too. What is redistricting? It's the process of redrawing congressional maps, which impacts who represents your family. It happens every 10 years and is tied to the census.
We have lawyers that had concerns about what they were doing.
In Florida, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis is pushing Republicans to draw maps that favor Republicans even more than what was originally proposed. In Kentucky, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear vetoed a redistricting map that heavily favors the GOP, but the state legislature overruled him. In Tennessee, Republicans are advancing plans to make it easier to win near Nashville. The same is true in Kansas, where Republicans are hoping to fare better in races near Kansas City. All of this puts pressure on President Biden to get something done. But getting something done in Washington right now for the White House isn't easy. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
Thank you so much, Joe. In other news, opening statements will begin today in the federal trial for 3 former Minneapolis police officers accused of violating George Floyd's civil rights during his 2020 arrest. Reporter Jamal Andres is in Minnesota with a preview of what to expect in court.
For nearly 2 years, Minneapolis has been at the center of the police reform debate, from the death of George Floyd and Daunte Wright to a citywide vote on remaking the police department. But for Tashira Garraway, this fight started more than 10 years ago.
I care about people that are in probably one of the worst pains of our lives. We were violated by the government, and these people treat us like, yeah, we did it and there's nothing you can do about it.
Garraway is the founder of Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence. Back in 2009, her fiancé was found dead in a recycling bin after fleeing from St. Paul police. The circumstances behind his death remain in dispute.
He got killed at a time where there was no Black Lives Matter. There was no movement. So I was by myself. And that is what makes me be so committed to these families, that I don't want them to be by themselves. The way that I felt by myself, the way that I was fighting, my goal and my heart is that I want to be to them what I didn't have.
Over the years, Garraway has built a network of grieving mothers, fathers, brothers, girlfriends, and more who have all lost family at the hands of police officers. She most recently worked with Katie Bryant, Daunte Wright's mother, providing connections to legal counsel, financial assistance, and a uniquely qualified support group.
It is important to me for these families to get the care, to know that you have a group of people that are there for you, that will ride this out with you, that will stand with you, that will fight with you, that got your back.
Tutau, J. Alexander King, and Thomas Lane are accused of violating George Floyd's civil rights by, 1, willfully failing to intervene when Derek Chauvin had his knee on Floyd's neck, and 2, showing deliberate indifference to Floyd's medical needs.
This is a harder trial than the Derek Chauvin trial.
Laura Coates is a former federal prosecutor from the Twin Cities area.
There is a distinction between the actual physical behavior of the officers. However, there is still the expectation that somebody in your custody was owed a duty of care. And even if you were not the person who was kneeling on this man's neck for 9 minutes, the fact that you had a role within law enforcement and could have possibly done something to prevent it, I think that speaks volumes to people.
Garraway, like so many others in Minneapolis, was in the crowd when Chauvin was found guilty for the murder of George Floyd. She says this trial is just as important.
But there was a time where it would be a lot of noise, you know, when they kill somebody, and then it would get silent or a little quiet down for a while. And I told the families, I said, this time there's no being quiet.
Judge Paul Magnuson estimates this trial will last at least a month. Tu Tao, J. Alexander King, and Thomas Lane are scheduled to stand trial for the state charges against them in June. Jamal Andrus, Newsy, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Now back here in Billings, hundreds marched from St. Patrick's Co-Cathedral to the Yellowstone County Courthouse lawn yesterday to mark 49 years since Roe v. Wade. All across the country, pro-life advocates take part in these March for Life events in hopes the landmark abortion decision will be reversed. Some feel that's more of a reality now than ever before. The Supreme Court is expected to rule on Dobbs versus Jackson this summer, which could give every state the power to make its own abortion laws. We heard from Montanans on both sides of the issue, holding their breath ahead of the ruling.
They probably won't announce their decision until June, so that gives them time, and it gives all of us time to pray and to fast for this issue, that this greatest injustice that has ever been legal in the United States.
It is deeply divided, but I also know that the vast majority of Americans do not want to see Roe overturned and believe that access to abortion should be available with very few restrictions.
And turning now to other news, Americans can start filing their taxes today, but some people may be waiting longer than expected for their refund. CBS's Michael George explains.
Last year, Claudia Longo filed her tax return in February. When she didn't receive it in a couple of months, she called the IRS.
You would be on hold for a long time, and then maybe that call gets dropped, or they send it to a different place, and then you have to wait again.
After calling multiple times and even reaching out to her senator, Longo finally got her tax refund 5 months later in August.
I was hoping to get that money to start my daughter on orthodontist treatment, and we had to delay it.
Around 30 million taxpayers had their refunds delayed last year because of pandemic-related issues, and the IRS is still playing catch-up. The Treasury Department is warning of more delays again this year.
What are some of the reasons we might see some delays this year?
Well, first of all, if your information doesn't match on the IRS systems, they'll certainly create problems.
Mark Stieber with Jackson Hewitt says the expanded child tax credit is a potential pitfall. Most parents only got half the money they were owed. The IRS is now sending out letters to help people properly file for the rest.
And that can be a little complicated. You have to fill out the form on how many dependents you have. You may have new dependents. Shared custody can create a complication.
Stieber says unemployment benefits are taxable. Stimulus checks are not, but still need to be reported on 2021 tax returns.
So make sure you understand what is taxable and what is not taxable.
The fastest way to get a refund is to file electronically and set up direct deposit. The IRS says most people who do that get a refund within 21 days. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
This year's tax filing deadline is April 18th.